So what is the best way? So I have so many questions, but I'll just ask you this one. Um, if Bernie Sanders runs again, they will be. They will definitely, in my opinion, if he runs again and he runs again as a Democrat, which I think is a mistake, if he runs again as a Democrat, they will cheat him again. So why wouldn't they? They cheated him last time, and there was no repercussions. Nobody got in trouble. Nobody got put in prison. Nobody got deposed even under oath. There was a lawsuit in a Florida court that just got thrown out, but the DNC admitted that they're a corrupt organization in court, which is a great thing. That's the one great thing out of that lawsuit that happened. And so now people aren't donating anymore to the Democratic National Committee. In fact, after they admitted in court that they don't have to run a fair and impartial primary, it was their worst fundraising month since 2003. And if you remember what was happening in 2003, the Democrats were getting in bed with George Bush and Dick Cheney to start the Iraq War. People stopped donating to them then. People have stopped donating to them now. And so they're just like bankers in a sense, because the bankers knew that they were running a Ponzi scheme when it came to the mortgage fraud scam, and they knew it was gonna come up someday. But when it did, when that bill came due, the American people were going to pay it. They weren't going to pay it, and the banks even got bigger. They got wealthier. So I feel that's how the corporate Democrats are approaching this. It's like they see their utter demise, but they know they got nothing else is going to happen. They're still going to be in power. They're going to actually get richer. I'm sure Neera Tanen's richer than she was 6 months ago, and all those people are, right? So I don't think that they care about reforming the Democratic Party. In fact, they're against reforming the Democratic Party, and they don't care what happens to the country. They don't care what happens to the party, and they certainly don't care what happens to working people at all, right?
I absolutely. I think it is. That's why they are so reluctant to make the budget slightly transparent to its own executive committee, because as soon as you see that budget, I mean, if I reverse engineer the budget, they burned $1 billion. And some of these states have, a couple $1,000s cash on hand. How are they going to win back 1,100 seats, all those legislatures, if they don't have any money? And then you've got President Obama out there raising separately, trying to keep the donors in his world to compete with entities that are tasked with winning back these legislatures. Well, he abandoned the Democratic Party when he was president, and the curtain's been pulled back, and we all know that now. And a lot of these state party chairs are very concerned. Not all of them, but many of them are. And I think, what I learned covering the DNC race through TYT Politics, and if anybody's interested in going back, there's some great interviews with someone named Ray Buckley, who was the New Hampshire chair. He ran for chair of the Democratic Party. He is somebody who, by all means, should be on this commission with us. And he called for a lot of reforms. But he's not on the transition team. They're just kind of keeping him out of this, because Ray Buckley had more experience with the Democratic National Committee than anyone, and he was exposing a lot of the things that were making it a dysfunction. But you're right, it's like a banking scheme. You got a lot of consultants, a lot of professionals who, to make it full circle, came into the party after the McGovern Commission. They ousted all the labor people, and they brought in a lot of professionals. And these professionals literally have conflicts of interest. They're DNC members, DNC staffers, or DNC executives who are also consultants to the party. And so, of course, it's in their interest to win and lose races. They don't care if they win. They just want to keep, picking the candidates that can raise the most money so they can make more money.
Yeah, people don't realize that's what this is about. And that, there's a consultant class, there's a political class that's getting rich off of the way politics is run in America right now. Bernie Sanders was a threat to that, which is why they don't attack Bernie Sanders' ideas. They only attack his character. They attack him as a sexist. They attack him as an old man who doesn't know how stuff works, even though he's the amendment king. And even though if he got elected, nothing could ever happen anyway, because he doesn't know how to work with Republicans, even though he's the amendment king. And so that's what's happening. So if anybody is a threat to their money train, their corporate money train, they immediately smear him. We've shown it. Well, I mean, that's why people come to this show. That's why people went to the Young Turks, because people got interested in Bernie Sanders. People got interested in politics for the first time because there was a guy who was actually talking about their problems in a real way, because he wasn't bought by corporations. He actually did have their interest at heart instead of pretending to have their interest at heart. As Christopher Hedges tells us, the Democrats today, they pay fealty to democracy. They pay fealty to liberalism, but they're neither of those things. They're just corporatists through and through. So what do you think is going to happen to the Democratic Party? Are you in a position to say, because this might be what would compromise your work, but I don't see them reforming. I see them incapable of reform. I see them with mediocre results in 2018 and them in a real nail biter in 2020. What do you think?
You know, we're dealing with a lot of, in some ways I think, oh gosh, these people are brilliant. And then in other ways, I think you guys lost 1,100 seats, so you're not that brilliant because you thought that nobody was going to notice that. I hope that, and listen, I don't have blindfolds on, so no one, call me out and say that I'm completely naive. My hope is that we get some sort of reforms passed through this commission, and then the commission has to issue its report in January, and then it goes before, a certain committee of the DNC. But if we do pull forward and have these reforms, this is a majority Hillary commission, so hopefully whoever's voting on this, next year, their voting aligns with the commission. With that being said, the reason why I think Bernie Sanders is so invested in reforming the Democratic Party is it's to start a new party. And I just want to make this clear. And I am the person who's, the Democrats think I'm the most radical person on this commission, right? So just so you have an understanding of where I stand with these people. You have to get on the ballot in 50 states. It is very difficult to get on the ballot in 50 states and to stay on the ballot and to have a line. The Working Families Party has been trying to, working at this for 15 plus years, and they're only in, a handful of states at this point. It's very, very, very difficult. And in New York State, where they started and they're headquartered, Governor Cuomo was trying to kill them, pull their funding, which is all labor funding. And this is the game we're playing. It's an institutional game. So what Bernie Sanders' strategy is that we run, and it's happening. Of the races that have been won in the last year, majority have been Bernie-crats. You have Christine Pellegrino, who flipped probably the biggest win the Democrats have seen in years. Flipped a Trump district 40 points. That was a Bernie-crat. She's in the assembly now. So his saying is that we need to become the institution. So if you are from a state where your DNC membership election is soon, run for those committee positions, because those are the people who are voting. And if half of the Democratic Party voted for Keith Ellison, and my guess is he probably won, and there's some mishigas that was happening in between the two ballots, I think that we're probably in the majority, and it really just comes down to a handful of seats. Public pressure is really important. So when you have me on the show to talk about these things, this is huge. They feel it. There's a reason they're going after me and Nina Turner and Linda Sarsour and all the different women in the movement. Because number one, these are the best feminists in the world. You've got the fighters in the front line, right? But also because we're making an impact. And I think every time they go after me, or anybody else, we just become stronger in solidarity. And it's being exposed. You have a lot of reporters now who are reporting on this stuff that probably wouldn't have in the past. So it's starting to become very clear what their game is. And I think that's why we have to sit there and say we need an inside and an outside strategy. It would be unheard of to have someone like me on a commission like this a year and a half ago.
Yes, I agree. So I really think the only way the Democratic Party can reform, because they tried to do that, what Bernie had prescribed was, you're probably the majority, go show up, take over your party. And then
Yep.
So we did that in California, and Bernie had always pointed to California as the big beacon of hope, right? Because we're an overwhelmingly Democratic state. We're a blue state in California. They have the Democrats have a super majority in the state legislature, and we have a Democratic governor, Jerry Brown, and we still can't get single payer. Isn't that funny? We still
Unreal.
can't get, still's not going to happen. In fact, so we did show up in January to take over our Democratic Party. So we voted for our Democratic delegates to the Democratic State Convention. And it was overwhelming that the Bernie-crats won, right? So I'm like, oh, we took over the Democratic Party in California. We're progressive. Turns out, no. Turns out, just like on the national scale, how the DNC rigs the primaries with super delegates, they also do that on the state level. There's also super delegates on the state level. And guess what? They got rid of Kimberly Ellis, who was supposed to be our progressive champion, who was going to be the chair of the Democratic National Party in California. They got rid of her, and they installed literally a guy who took money from the pharmaceutical. He's a pharmaceutical lobbyist.
Yep.
So
And that's why we can't just have it come down to a couple people. We have to start to, we've won a couple of seats so that we're in the majority in the last year. So it's going to happen regardless. The generation, that's coming or it exists, and the millennials are overwhelmingly Bernie-crats. So it's just going to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. We can just seamlessly move into that position, or we can start to take out some of these motherfuckers, because that's how I feel about it. It's every year we just need to keep running. We just got to that point. Next year it needs to be more of a majority. And we need to expose these people. I don't think Eric Bauman knew that he was going to be, he's not going to be able to sit through this people. If you keep putting pressure on Eric Bauman, make it so it's difficult for him to go outside without being shouted out that he doesn't care about people, that he only cares about pharmaceuticals. That's what we have to do. If you're not happy with Tom Perez, tell him. Show up at the DNC. Talk about the people's platform. They have a duty to us. And so if they're going to play these games, we have to let them know that they can't get away with it. It's an abusive relationship. You have to literally say, no more. No more.
I agree. Of course, I agree with you. The only problem is that, they did show up in California, and the chairman of the party told them to shut the fuck up and get out.
Right.
And then they installed a pharmaceutical lobbyist as the chairman of the party. That's the Democrats doing that. That's the goddamn Democrats. So that's when that happened, I was like, I think this is a dead party. I don't think it's able or capable. Thomas Frank doesn't think it's capable of reform. He said so in his book anyway. Yeah. So,
but then what's the alternative? It can't. It's not
my theory. I had a theory.
Yeah.
My theory was before November, before the election last year, was that everybody who supported Bernie should say, I'm going to vote for a Green New Deal. So then the Democrats would have to change. They would have to come get us. But we have most of the people who voted for Bernie decided, no, I'm going to vote because of Trump, which is the exact thing Malcolm X warned us against. They got to show you the wolf so you run towards the fox. And so we did it. So if everybody I know who agreed with a Green New Deal, which is most of the progressives agreed with the Green New Deal. If they would have voted their conscience instead of voting out of fear, if they would have voted their conscience, we would have got maybe 10, 15% of the vote for the Green Party, which would have changed politics in America forever going forward, because no longer could the Democratic Party dismiss the Greens and wag their finger at them and expect their votes and then put a right-winger as their vice president. So now it would have changed. They would have had to have had a coalition party. They would have had to have done something. But now they don't have to do anything because, they've sufficiently shamed all the Bernie-crats into voting for Hillary Clinton, to where there were more Bernie supporters who voted for Hillary than there were Hillary supporters who voted for Barack Obama. So
you're right on that. But I think we need to stop thinking in terms of just presidential politics, because that's actually what got the DNC in this situation to begin with.
Correct.
There's New York State is a perfect example, just because I'm hyper-focused on New York State. You have people in New York State, elected officials in New York State, who supported Hillary Clinton for a whole lot of reasons. Some of them love her. Some of them were like, we want a woman president. Some of them were afraid of her, frankly, and were afraid that they were going to lose their positions. But a lot of these folks have very progressive records in the state, hate Governor Cuomo, and so there are these factions. And for us, local politics, if there is really, really important. And the Green Party just doesn't have that institutional structure at all. At all. And that's my concern is when it's all about presidential politics, that's when we lose our basic rights, like access to, like the shutting down Planned Parenthood. That's a serious problem. That's when you get people like Ted Cruz, like a complete far right extremist in Texas, which if you look at the numbers is not that far right. Maybe a moderate Republican should be there, but not this nutcase. So you do see what I'm saying? We've just completely forgotten about local politics, and Thomas Frank talks about that too.
Yes. So do you think there's a chance that this Unity Reform Commission actually does do reforms to the point where we have open primaries for the Democrats and we get rid of superdelegates?
I hope so. I would say the superdelegate stuff seems like there's a lot of movement on that. It's not a democratic process. There's a lot of public outrage over superdelegates. If we don't, well, first thing, we're mandated to do something on superdelegates. Just so you know, there will be a reform about superdelegates. How extreme that reform is, I don't know, but I know that if there's more public pressure, it definitely puts that pressure on us to do something bigger and bolder. Open primaries, I mean, that to me is just a because there's a whole line, right? Like there's closed primaries and there's open primaries, and then there's a million things in between. Same day registration, huge. No, I don't understand these people who are for closed primaries. If you live in a closed primary state, they're incredibly unpopular. New York has the most closed primary in the country, and we have the lowest voter. I mean, literally, it's horrifying. It's horrifying that in New York State, which should be completely democratically controlled, we still have closed primaries, which is just incumbent protection. That's all it is. So when 50% of those under the age of 36, millennials, are registering as independents, but 8 out of 10 of them are self-identifying as progressives. That's like that old parable about the guy who's on a boat and he's drowning in the lake and he's calling to God and he goes, God, please save me. And then God sends in, an eagle, and God sends in, a fish, and God sends in all, and the guy keeps going, no, God's gonna save me. And then the guy sinks and he goes to heaven, and then he says to God, God, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent you an eagle, I sent you a fish. So to me, the Democratic Party has been struggling for membership for years, right? And they're handed an entire generation, the largest generation in history, that's like, guess what? Not only are we're progressive, we are liberal. And what does the Democratic Party do? No, thanks. We don't want you. You're registering as independents. We're just going to keep our closed primaries.
The biggest group of voters in America right now are independents, and when people have just to explain what a closed primary is, you have to register as a Democrat months ahead of time. And in New York, it was how many months ahead of time did you have to register in New York?
For the presidential primary,
yes.
6 months ahead of time.
So
October.
So you had to in October. You had to register 6 months ahead of the primary to actually vote. And in those 6 months, people found out a lot about Bernie Sanders, and maybe they wanted to show up and vote for him in the primary, and now they couldn't because there was this requirement that you had to sign up 6 months earlier. So it seems very undemocratic. It's very undemocratic. It's a dumb process. So people say, well, we should only let Democrats vote in our Democratic primary. Well, why don't you let other United States citizens come join your party to be part of it? That's what an open primary is. Hey, I like this candidate who's in your party. I want to go vote for that candidate who's in your party. Except the corporate Democrats don't want that. They don't want independents voting for progressives because they don't want progressives, all right? Because they're corrupted by corporate money. They've completely abdicated their responsibility to their electorate, the people running the party and the elected officials in the Democratic Party. This is the majority of them, not all of them, but this is the majority of them, and certainly the Democratic National Committee for sure. So...
And one thing we learned, if I can just jump in for a second, there's a woman on this commission named Elaine Kamarck who's written a book on primary politics, and she's not from our side. She's somebody who just chimes in with a lot of historical knowledge often. And she said, she wasn't appointed by Bernie, is what I say. And she said an argument that people often make is that by having open primaries or opening up the primaries a little bit more, there's fear of crossover vote, that Republicans will come in and try to tamper with an election. And she goes, I have no historical evidence of that. That is a fear tactic that has been used for decades, and there's no evidence of that. Furthermore, for my counter argument is this. If this is because the CBC has been issuing this commentary, this is the response to open primaries, is that it dilutes the minority vote. Well, the reality is there are more people of color who are not able to vote because of closed primaries, because millennials are the largest generation and most diverse generation in history. More that are unable to vote than would be diluted if we opened up the primary process more. And so all of these arguments have been debunked. And frankly, if we want to talk about, this is what originally got me in trouble, as I said, closed primary, it's self-inflicted voter suppression. And that's what got me in trouble.
Why did that get you in trouble?
Because it worked, whatever. Because it hit them where they didn't want to hear it. The Democrats don't like to be called out for tactics that they're doing. They're using this kind of commentary against Republicans when this is self-inflicted.
So the Democrats have been saying, not loud enough as far as I'm concerned, that the Republicans are suppressing the vote with voter ID laws and what have you, which they are. And but you're saying, you're making the point, hey, the Democrats are doing the same thing in the primary. They're suppressing the vote in the primary, and no one. And so that's a great point. I haven't heard anyone make that same analogy before. So thanks for doing that, because I'm going to repeat it now. And well,
Get
listen.
Ready.
So
Get ready for the storm.
So Nomi, should I be optimistic or should I be pessimistic? Should I work for a third party or should I hold out hope for the Democratic Party? You tell me.
Well, I don't think it's one or the other. I think that we should have an inside-outside game. I'm not a pessimist. I'm not an optimist. I just like to be prepared for the worst and best case scenarios. And with the case of this commission, I don't know if I'm allowed to do this or not, but I'm going to say it. We need to hear from the public. We need to hear from the real public, not the paid trolls on the internet. You guys listening, if you care about the primary process and you care about progressives winning at the local all the way to the national level, right now, the Democratic Party is an institution that's going to deliver that. That is something that Bernie Sanders, the closest thing, right? In terms of the uphill battle is only taking over a few spots and changing some reforms. Granted, it's a much bigger task, but it is the closest thing. So we need to hear from you as to why that's important. And if you hear some really loud Twitter trolls shouting online, know that they're not representative of the real Democratic Party membership. But also, Tom Perez, Chairman Perez, is at this point 6 months into this process. He needs to hear, what has he done? What reforms has he put forward? A resistance summer, frankly, great. Okay, cool. You're doing a bunch of rallies all over the country. But, the Democratic Party is not doing the services it should. They need to understand what's at risk here if we don't have these reforms. And so I'm asking you guys to reach out to more of these, DNC commission members to really shine a light on what's happening here and pay attention. There's going to be live streams up. There's going to be video. Watch it. And I hope, Jimmy, you can show some of this coverage, too, from the commission, because I think it would be really eye-opening to folks.
So how do people let their voices be heard by the commission and by Tom Perez?
Well, they're definitely paying attention on Twitter, whether or not they say so or not.
Okay.
Op-eds, if you have any sort of ability to write pieces, if you're a journalist, if you can do YouTube videos, go on Medium, that stuff actually goes a long way. And tweet it at me, and I'm happy to share stuff like this because I think it's really important that we have counter arguments. They have people out there writing pieces, smear pieces. We need to come there with facts. Call your local electeds if you have any Democrats, your local DNC members.
And so Is there any part of this Unity Reform Commission, is there any setup to hear from the public, to take public comments?
No.
Well, how could we change that? Is that possible?
Call Tom Perez's office and ask for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Why wouldn't the Unity Reform Commission take public comments? I mean, I think that's essential. Don't you think?
I do. And I've talked about it with a couple of commission members that we say, even if it doesn't mean that they come into the commission and listen to commentary, there should at least be some sort of utility online where people can share their comments and we can read them and engage. Because I think the Sanders people all understand this and prioritize it just because we're out there and we hear people's complaints and let's just be clear, the Sanders side, we're all activists. I don't think any of us are consultants. No, none of us are consultants. I mean, maybe the closest thing is Jeff Weaver, but Jeff Weaver is no longer advising campaigns. He was on Bernie's campaign. But, none of us are in the professional business of politics. Some of us have been electeds or chairs of parties, but, nobody's making money on the side from candidates. There are some of those folks on the commission, and I think that they're disconnected from what's happening at the roots. So, yeah.
Okay. It's a dire situation. I don't think you're right. I don't think I think people in the country realize that their political class has failed them, which is why we got Trump in the first place.
Yep.
And they're going to continue to fail us, especially with the op-eds in the Washington Post today by war criminal defenders who are saying that the Nazis and people who fight Nazis are just the same.
Unbelievable.
People, Nazis,
and you have ADL doing the same thing. And I think that needs to be put on alert too. ADL is going after a group of people that is literally fighting Nazis.
It's a crazy time. I saw Nancy Pelosi. She called out. She did she released a statement from her office which condemned Antifa's violence at Berkeley. Opposing fascism is not the same thing as being a fascist. That there's just what I don't understand. What people don't understand about that. The only thing that a tolerant society cannot tolerate is intolerance. Exactly. So if you make space for intolerance, pretty soon you become a fascist country. You can't make space for Nazis. I'm sorry. No. You just can't make space for them. That's how I feel. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this whole idea of like living in a moderate world is a new construct, right? That's actually, going back to Thomas Frank, he keeps coming up today. It's a DLC era idea. Jim Hightower, who's a great writer, activist, is from Texas. He's on the board of Our Revolution as well. He has that famous quote about the only thing in the middle of the road is a dead armadillo.
Yellow lines and dead armadillos.
Yellow lines.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. So if you're going to be moderate on Nazism, you're going to be dead. Yep. That's what that saying means in that situation. Okay, well, good luck to you on the Unity Reform Commission. Please check back in with us. When is your next meeting for the Unity Commission?
Mid-October, around October 15th, I believe, or 16th or 17th. And it's in Las Vegas, but it's happening at the same time as their DNC meeting, their fall DNC meeting, which is really important because that's when we haven't had that happen yet. So you're going to have a lot of people in Las Vegas that are DNC members who are probably going to be a little bit more engaged in this meeting, this Unity Reform meeting than other times. So, if you can make it out to Vegas, it's open. The meetings are always open. And hopefully the DNC will have the last meeting up on its YouTube page quickly because
So if I wanted to go to that DNC meeting and sit in the room as you guys had discussions, I could do that?
Yes, you could.
Oh, no.
I'll see you in Vegas. I'll see you in Vegas.
It'll be fun. I would love it. You should do like a live radio show outside and invite some of the members on.
That's a great idea. I think maybe we will do that. We just got our live stream capability, so I think we might live stream some stuff from there. So that's a great idea. Well, thank you. Good luck. What happens between now and October? Are you guys supposed to be talking over stuff, or what happens?
Yeah. So we have our own little committees, and we talk to our committees in between. And each of the committees kind of have their own progress. There's the Superdelegates committee. There is the Primary and Caucus Committee, and then there's the Party Reform Committee.
And which committee are you on?
I'm on Party Reform.
Oh, okay. All right, Nomi, good luck. Thanks for taking time with us, and don't let the smearers get you down on public media, okay, on social media.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Jimmy, you do great work, and I hope to see you in LA soon, otherwise.
I hope to see you again soon. Okay, thanks, Nomi.
Take care.
Hey, everybody, we have 2 live Jimmy Dore shows in September. September 25th, we're in San Diego, and September 18th in Burbank, California. Get your tickets right there. There's a link right there.